So, Lee, the title of your book has two words in it: pride and privilege.
Yes.
So, I kind of want to break that down a little bit. So, talk to me like why did you call it pride and privilege? And then let's kind of break these things down and talk about each of those things.
Okay. Well, I mean, pride has different connotations, so it is very, apt in our culture. We could look at it in a positive or a negative. But privilege is a word that we pull out a lot to use as a weapon, and
True.
it it doesn't need to be weaponized. Actually, privilege is something that we all have. And I actually heard this on your podcast too, which was really interesting because I'd never heard anyone else talk about this. But privilege is something that we steward. And it is
Yes.
something that, if we don't recognize that we have it, which a lot of us are pushing privilege away. I'm not privileged. I don't have privilege, because privilege has become a bad word, the P word now. but but it doesn't need to be. And if we can realize that we can turn privilege on its head and we can say, actually, I need to recognize the areas where I do have privilege so I can steward it well. Because when we push away our privilege, we can't steward it at all. And so, and what privilege is meant for is not for us, but it's for other people. So if we
Come
can
on.
learn that we all have privilege, we need to realize where we've been blessed in life and where we can steward it well for others, for the good of others. That's actually going to move us forward. So,
Yes. So as opposed to so now cuz now the conversation around that is rooted in guilt and shame.
absolutely.
So then you don't even want so then it's like, "Oh, we shouldn't be talking about privilege or the privilege that you do have, you should be ashamed of it or feel guilty
Right.
about it." When you turn that on its head and say, "Let me recognize it. Let me lean into what it is,
Yep.
recognize it for what it is, and then steward what I have." That's a completely different approach and a completely different conversation.
Right.
And when you talk about it for the benefit of it being given away, it changes everything.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, just think about some of the historical people or the Bible people. If they didn't recognize their privilege and use it, like what if they were, for one, what if they didn't even see their privilege? What if
Right.
they said, "Well, I'm just a poor person. I can't do anything." They're going to stay in victim mindset, right? Or if they say, "Well, if they go to the other extreme, they don't want to use it for the good of others, then
Right.
then they're gonna, and we're not gonna benefit from their privilege.
Yeah.
In that parable of the people who were given, the workers that were given, certain amounts of gold or whatever, or
Yes.
talents,
Yes.
you could use that for privilege. I mean, the one who had only one thought he didn't have anything and he buried it in the ground. He either was ashamed of it or he didn't think it was enough.
Yeah.
And so, if
He
you,
was fearful.
yeah. So if you think you carry privilege and you don't like that you have privilege, you're like, get it off me. You're not going to use it. And
Yeah.
if you think
Yeah.
that you don't have any, you're also not going to use it. So,
I was thinking about how on the stewardship side of it, how there are certainly cases where there might be a privilege which you recognize it, and part of your stewardship might be, not in all cases, but it might be putting on a glove, a boxing glove, and maybe or a gardening glove, or
sure.
maybe both, right? As we talked about in our conversation, in order to address something, but not always. Sometimes it's just like in your own sphere of influence in your own personal life or whatever. But I think that point is what you brought up was so good, is that it's about stewarding it, whatever that stewardship looks like,
Hmm.
and being led by the Spirit on what that should even look like, and get godly wisdom on what that should look like,
Right.
and not assume what that should look like, or let other people be the judges of what that should look like.
Right. That's true. Yeah. I mean, in different seasons of my life, I've had to steward my privilege in different ways,
Yeah.
I mean, the fact that, when I went to each person and I said, will you run for office? And they were like, no, but I'd follow you if you would. And it's like, okay, well, apparently I've been selected for something, lucky me, but it's like I had to step up and realize that it was actually my duty because of my ability. It was my duty to step up and do this. It wasn't,
Yeah.
something I can just pat myself on the back. Oh, good job. It was actually something I had to take and use. And,
Yeah.
and if I didn't recognize what I was carrying, I wouldn't do that. And I think so
Yes.
many Christians are comfortable not recognizing what is in them because they don't want to carry that responsibility to activate
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, just that our own divine design is a privilege in and of itself when we're operating authentically in it,
it.
because it's carrying something that's going to be helpful for somebody
Right.
else.
And when you're using your privilege, you're not, you're usually not getting prideful about it because
Say more.
it's hard to take that responsibility and do something with it. It's actually, sometimes it'd be easier not to have it, you know?
Yeah.
So
Yeah, that's so true. I love that. That's super good. All right, so I appreciate you sharing that, because that was one thing that we didn't talk about in our conversation. In fact, if you're watching this, you need to go back and watch the full conversation, because it was super, super good around really having courageous conversations around peacemaking versus peacekeeping and all kinds of goodness. So thanks, Lee. Appreciate you.
thank you so much, Shay.